Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hi everyone, welcome. Today I have Hero Arts card kit for December, and this was a really fun card kit. I just couldn't pass up on this one. So I'm going to pull everything out of this box for you and show you what is included. This first stamp isn't included in the kit, but I just wanted to show you one of the extras that I bought. This is a 6x6 cling stamp, and it's called Blowing in the Wind, and I just thought it was so cute. I had to pick that up. So the actual kit comes wrapped up in this pretty purple tissue paper. I really love how they package their card kits. And then they have this pretty satin bow around all of the goodies. I'm going to save this ribbon. It's so beautiful. I've seen other ladies actually use this ribbon on some of their cards. I thought that was so clever. This stamp set is full of images of fairies and dandelions. It has a cute little mouse. They also include 18 coordinating frame cuts. It's just fun to have the dies that match your images. I have the rest of it packaged in this vellum envelope. And these are some moonshine confetti. I love these. I have these in my stash already, so it's good to have a little bit more. I go through them really fast. This is a Jelly Roll Stardust glitter pen. When you color this over your images, it puts down the most beautiful glitter, and it has a nice small tip so you can get into tight places with this. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Just going to scribble some on this piece of paper here. I hope you can see that, but it just sparkles and is so beautiful. And this is some of their shimmer paper. You get 2 of each color. And the colors are Misty Rose, Lime Gold, Breeze, and History. I don't know which go to which paper. Those are the names of them. They were very fun papers to work with. Just love all of that shimmer. And that's everything that's included in the kit. So let's get started on our first card. I'm going to use this cute daisy image. This is going to be a 1-layer card, and so I'm going to do a lot of masking. I want my fairy to be in the front, and so I'm going to stamp her out first. I'm using my favorite black ink, Extreme Black ink from My Favorite Things. And then I'm going to put a mask over her. I have that already cut out. And then I can stamp the little daisy that she's sitting on. I love using my mini Misty for projects like this because you can stamp them out several times to get a nice dark impression. And I'm going to be stamping this little flower out a few times on this panel. And I have the mask all ready for that. Then I'm going to stamp it underneath the first flower. And I didn't clean off my stamp, so I was very careful to not put it down until I was sure where I wanted it, because I knew the black ink would transfer. But you could always put it on a piece of acetate and move it around to see where you want it first. I have to apologize for my voice again. It's been a pretty rough winter for me and my family. The kids have gotten sick a lot, and then when they get sick, I inevitably get sick too. So I am really looking forward to spring this year. Sometimes it can be hard to get the lines to stamp out near the mask, but if you press down hard enough, it works. Okay, and now I'm going to stamp another flower over this little fairy. So I wanted to cut out the rest of her because I wasn't sure where exactly the flower, I wanted to position the flower. I'm putting another mask at the top of this card so that it doesn't stamp onto the back of it. And that's going to be my last flower. I was having trouble getting a good impression there because it was so close to the edge of the Mini Misty. But I managed to get it to stamp dark enough. I'm going to add in the stems of these flowers, and I'm just using a pencil to see where I want them to go. And then I'm going to go over this with my Copic multiliner, and this is a 0.3. It's a very fine head. And I'm just going to very carefully draw over these lines. And after I draw those in, I'm going to use an eraser just to erase all of the pencil lines. And I kept all of my masks. You never know when you're going to use it again. That way you don't have to cut it out. You can just attach it to the back of your packaging and you'll have it. Nice and handy. Now for a little bit of Copic coloring. And if I had been thinking ahead, which I definitely wasn't, I would have used my colored pencils, because this will leak through to the other side of this paper. But I just kept going with it because it didn't bother me too much. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. So the day I'm doing this voiceover, there is a record cold here in Chicagoland, and my kids are home. I love having them home. It's just hard to do voiceovers when they're around. So if you hear little things in the background, I apologize for that, but it's my kids having fun. Fairies are so fun to color in, and the fairies in this stamp set are so beautiful. I just love this stamp set. My little daisies, I want to be white. One of my favorite flowers is a Shasta daisy, and they're just white, bright, bold flowers that come out in the summer. So I'm just using my grays to color in some shadows on the petals, and then a yellow and some browns to color in the center of it. This makes for some really fast coloring because all you're putting in is just a few shadows. And then I blend those out really well with my C00 just to soften them up a little bit. And I'm using the cool grays here. I seem to favor the cool grays for some reason. I just like the look that they give. I know a lot of the artists prefer the warm grays, especially on the little critters that they color in. But I still use my cool grays on them as well. And now for the stems, I'm just using 2 greens for that. And I'm using the darker green just to put the shadows underneath the flowers and along the sides. And of course, I'm going to use the Sakura Jelly Roll Stardust pen on her wings. And I wish the camera did it justice because it just looks beautiful. Next, I'm using my Cutter Bee scissors to cut out the side of this panel. I'm going to showcase some of the beautiful glitter paper behind this. But first, I'm going to stamp the sentiment. And this just says, I wish you the best. It just fit perfectly up in that corner. So that's one of the reasons I used the sentiment. And then I'm using some of the soft gold shimmer paper. I'm going to glue that down to the inside of my card. And then it kind of showcases the paper as well as the pretty stamp. So I really like how this card turned out. But you can see the Copic pencil that bled through to the other side, but it didn't bother me that much. Now on to card number 2. I'm going to use the 4 different dandelion images from the set. I'm using some 80-pound Neenah Solar White cardstock. I like to use that paper when I'm going to pull out my Copic markers. I was able to color up these dandelions pretty fast. There's not much to them, but they sure are cute little images. I'm using 2 different shades of yellow Copic marker for the flowered ones. And then I thought they needed more contrast, so I come in with a darker yellow Copic marker. Just using 2 Copics for the green stems and leaves. And then once I'm done with all the coloring, I'm going to use the coordinating dies to cut these out. I already snipped them apart, and it does take some time. There are a lot of dies in this set. And then I like to put them right away into a clear plastic storage envelope. With all of these little images, it's easy for me to lose them, and I've done that before, and it's just heartbreaking. They look so cute cut out. I used these dies to cut out some fun foam. I wanted to put a little bit of dimension behind these images. I'm using a little bit of liquid glue to glue them together. The fun foam will give them nice even dimension. You could use foam dots, but it's kind of tricky to cut them down to fit these narrow images. I also used my window cover plate to cut out some more fun foam and a piece of blue cardstock. And later I changed this blue. I simply add a piece of purple cardstock over it. Wanted it to be the complementary color to yellow. Just looked better, I thought. Now I'm going to adhere this onto a piece of the glitter paper. This was the really pale pink glitter paper. And in each of these windows, I'm going to glue one of the flowers. And this is like the 4 stages of a dandelion flower's life. First one when it's just beginning to bloom. And then the second one when it's out in full bloom. And I'm cutting down these petals to fit inside these windows. And then the third image is where the yellow is gone and it's all seed now. I don't know what you call that. And the fourth one is where it's almost all blown away. I'm going to stamp out my sentiment now. And it's a really cute sentiment. It just says, "You're dandy." I'm going to heat emboss this on a piece of black cardstock with some white embossing powder. And then I can melt this, and it turns a bright white once it's melted. And then I can cut this out with one of my banner dies. This is a faux stitched banner die, and I thought that this was just still a little bit too big. So I'm going to cut it out along the faux stitching just to make it a little more narrow. You could use your paper trimmer to do this, but I'm just going to use my long pair of scissors. It's pretty easy to do, just to cut along the stitching. I'm going to use some more liquid adhesive to glue this down. Didn't want it to cover up my flowers too much. And then I thought it needed something more, so I stamped out these cute ladybug images. I'm going to glue them flat down into the windows. And then I pulled out my Nouveau white drops just to add a little more fluff and interest to these dandelions on the bottom. And that finishes this card. I like how this card turned out. I really love these dandelion images. And then, of course, for my third card, I have to use the cute little mouse image. I'm going to stamp these out on a piece of colored cardstock. And this is Fog Gray from Simon Says Stamp. Just a very pale gray. And I'm going to color in these images with some colored pencils. I want my little mouse to be gray, so this gray paper is a nice base for this image. I'm just using various shades of gray. Then for his little tail and feet and nose, I'm using a very pale pink color. I'm taping my paper down just to make sure I hold it still. I tend to turn my paper a lot when I'm coloring, and I don't want to make you guys dizzy. And for the dandelion, it's very easy coloring. just the stems and the center of the dandelion. And these are some Polychromos colored pencils I'm using today. And then I tried using a white colored pencil on the dandelion fluff, whatever it's called. And it added a little bit. You can tell a little bit that it's white, but not a lot. I always use the white Prismacolor pencil for my white. The Polychromos white isn't very dark in my opinion. I put this back in my Mini Misti to stamp it out again and crispen up the lines. Is that a word, crispen? And I can cut them out with the coordinating dies. I find when I use my purple tape or micropore tape or whatever on colored paper, colored cardstock, you have to be really careful to pull it up because it tears easier, I think. And I love how it cut out in between his tail and his back, between his arms and his chest. It's so cute. Okay, now I'm going to play with my background stamp. I'm using another piece of fog gray cardstock. I'm using some anti-static powder first, and then I'm going to use some Simon Says Stamp clear ink because I'm going to heat emboss this with more white embossing powder. And I had to do this part of the card twice because the first time I did it, it didn't stamp out very well. That happens sometimes with new stamps. So the second time was the charm on this card. And it stamps out nice and crisp. And I adhered it to a white piece of type paper just so I could hold it easier. Now I'm pouring on the white embossing powder. And then I'm just holding onto the type paper to keep my hands out of the way of the heat gun. The white really pops off of this gray paper. It looks pretty. I'm going to use a circle die to cut out a little frame for this mouse. I'm just very carefully pulling that tape off. Before I adhere my card together, I'm going to use some iced spruce Distress Oxide and a little bit of my very favorite Tattered Rose, just to add a little more color to this card. Later, I come back in with even more Tattered Rose. Now for the little window, I'm going to add some more green Distress Oxide, so I have some interest behind my mouse. This is another piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock. I just love how smoothly these Distress Oxides blend onto the paper. I put some foam tape behind this panel. I taped my white cardstock down just to hold it in place so I could align it well. And now I'm using more foam tape behind my little mouse. I was out of my fun foam, so that's why I'm using the foam squares to put behind him. And I thought this sentiment is just perfect for this card. It says, "No wish is too big or too small." And I'm using another faux stitch banner to cut that out. And I will glue that down flat onto my card panel. And I'm going to cut off the excess with a pair of long scissors. I'm using some of the Moonshine Confetti sequins just to add a little bit of shimmer to this card. And then I don't show it, but I do come in with a dark green colored pencil to put some ground beneath my little mouse. But you can see that on the still shots at the end of this video. And that completes this card. I had so much fun playing with the daisy stamps, and I wanted to use them on this next card again. I'm going to start out by stamping out my sentiment. And I'm just going to stamp this onto a little circle die cut. And I'm using some green ink for this. It's called Bamboo Leaves, and it's from Memento. And I have to stamp that up a few times just to get it nice and dark. I'm going to make a wreath out of these dandelions, and this is going to be the center. Before I adhere them down, I'm just placing them to see where I want them to be, and I'm cutting off the stems. I used Copic markers again to color these in, and I didn't show that this time, just to save time. I'm going to adhere these flat onto this pretty piece of gold cardstock. My sentiment hasn't been adhered down yet. It's just taped there for placement because I want to pop that up with some more foam tape. This was a pretty fast card to put together, but I really love the result. Now I can tape down my sentiment. I just put that down lightly so I can still shift it around if it needs to be centered better. Just taping that down onto a white card base. And now, of course, for more of the Stardust pen. And I'm just using it on the yellow bits of the flowers. I went ahead and added a few gold dots to my card, and I decorated the inside just a little bit with some leftover flowers. Okay, now it's time to use another fairy and this cute mushroom stamp. I'm going to do some more masking on this card. So I'm starting out with stamping the little ladybug because I want her to appear as though she's crawling on the little mushroom. After I stamp this ladybug, I'm going to use a little bit of Simon Says Stamp masking paper to create a mask for this ladybug. It was kind of hard to cut this out. It's such a small image. And then I can just protect this image while I stamp out my mushroom. I want it to be kind of hanging off the side of the card. When you mask and overlap the images on your cards, it makes the scene more interesting than just stamping them out unconnected, I think. And I think it's really fun to do. And once you've finished masking and stamping, it's really fun pulling off the masks and seeing the outcome of the little scene that you've built. After stamping this mushroom, I'm going to go ahead and put on the mask. I'm using some more Simon Says Stamp masking paper. Just trying to get the release paper off the back. And next I'm going to stamp out some more dandelions. I'm moving my paper up just a little bit in my mini MISTI so I can get just the right placement. I had some of these dandelions already stamped out on some masking paper, and it was a challenge cutting out the mask for this dandelion. The petals are so small, and when I make masks, I like to cut right on the stamped line so that I don't get any weird halo effects. Next, I'm stamping out another fairy. I think she's so pretty. I also cut out a mask for her. I'm just taking off the release paper again, and then I can place that over her. I want to stamp out another mushroom under her little foot. So it looks like she's kind of half standing, half flying off this little mushroom. And then I decide to pull off the masks so that I can reuse the mushroom mask for this one. I have to shift my panel again so that I can get this mushroom stamped out so it looks a little bit lower on the panel. I'm using some Polychromos pencils to color in these images. This did take a while because I like to build up my layers slowly. So I'm just going to show you the fairy. I like to start with her skin first and then move on to the rest of her. My color scheme for this card are orange, pink, and yellow. I just love those three colors together. So I'm going to have her dress be kind of an ombre color. So the orange is going to be at the bottom, then the darker pink, and then fade up into the lighter pink. So for Christmas, I got a full set of the Polychromos Faber-Castell colored pencils. And I've really been enjoying using those. I purchased the hex chart from Sandy Allnock's website. It was really fun coloring that in and becoming more familiar with these colors. I think it's a lot easier when you have a smaller palette to use. My older set is just a set of 36. And that was easy just to pull out and grab what colors I had. With the full sets, you have to think a little more and plan out your colors. There's so many. So that's why it helps to have a swatch sheet of all of your colors. You can just glance at that and see what colors you want to pull out. I decided to do some ink blending with some Distress Oxides for my background. So I have masks over all of my images, and I'm starting out with some tumbled glass at the top. I wanted there to be a pretty sunset behind my images. The next color I'm using is Wilted Violet. And then I'm using Tattered Rose over the rest of the card panel. This sunset behind them just added a lot of interest to this scene. I'm going to do some water flicking. And I just got a little cup of water, and I'm using one of my small paint brushes and just kind of flicking that over it. This will add some cute distressing to my background. It makes it look kind of magical when it's done because it has all of these little bubbles. They look like bubbles floating around in the air. And then I let that sit for a few minutes, and then I dab it up with a paper towel. It wasn't distressed enough, so I'm going to go in with an even bigger watercolor brush and add larger flicks of water onto this background. And now is the fun part. I get to pull up all of the masks. I'm just being careful so I can save these. And it did pull off some of the colored pencil, as you see there. So if I were to do this again, I would leave my coloring for the very end. I did have to go back over some of the images and just darken the colors again. And this little mask was kind of hard to peel off. Okay, last, I have my sentiment to stamp out. And I put it back in my Mini Misty. And I start off by using my Extreme Black ink again. I stamped that up several times, but it just wasn't getting dark enough. I don't think I let the Distress Oxides dry long enough. So I do pull out my VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamp it one last time, and that does the trick. And I'm using a pink card base. I didn't cut this panel down at all. I'm just attaching it to the pink card base. And then I want to use some more of the Moonshine sequins. It just seemed a little bare in the middle of the card, so it just needed something more. And that finishes off card number 5. This was a really fun card kit to play with, and I hope you enjoyed watching me create these cards. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.